right, so coming up next, we will have a forum discussion on the topic of STEAM for all. And later, we will have our honorable guests to come up and be joined by our facilitator, Professor Becky Loo, who is the head of Department of Geography from University of Hong Kong. And they will be talking about how STEAM are for all and how they would be talking about how the STEAM education could be implied in our education systems. All right, so let us welcome Dr. Ericsson and Professor Taylor to come on the stage again, as well as Professor NG Tai Kai, the Executive Director of the Hong Kong Academy of Gifted Education, and Mr. Lau Chun Hung, the Principal of Lok Sin Tong Yu Kan Hing Secondary School, Hong Kong. And please also welcome Professor Becky Loo, our facilitator. Thank you.
Microphone for me, thank you.
So great. I hope you have a fruitful morning. The next event that we have would be lunch. So it's supposed to be at 1 p.m. So I'm eager to make sure that we will finish on time so that everyone can have enough time to go to the lunch venue. So my smartphone will ring at 12:55, so that would alert us and to, kind of move ahead to the lunch venue. So actually, I was quite excited to moderate this particular session because with such a distinguished panel, I think we can talk about a lot of very important issues in STEM education. But instead, I would like to focus on a topic that I'm quite passionate about, which is STEAM education for all. So I think the most important thing is that we have to recognize, even though nowadays a lot of people still ignore or refuse to accept, the fact remains that there are many barriers to STEAM education for all. So it's important that we recognize that this is a topic not just for the minorities or for the disadvantaged, but it's actually about every one of us. Because if talents across different groups have not been properly groomed and developed, scientific progress in all fields will slow down. And I think, right now, these barriers range from the gender gap, racial prejudice, various socioeconomic inequities, and sometimes quite frustrating cultural stereotypes. So I want to, therefore, to the audience, I think there's a lot of teachers and educators among us. So let's think about that wonderful experience that you have empowered a person. So whether it's the girl who thought that ladies are born to be weak in mathematics, to become a major in engineering, or that timid boy from an immigrant family who becomes a medical doctor. With your support and with your encouragement. So I think recognizing all these gaps is an essential step if we really want to address STEAM education for all. So I want to share with you some statistics with the panelists as well as with the audience first. So this is just a handy example where statistics are readily available in relation to STEAM education. So these 3 slides are based on the 2015 data for all major American and Canadian engineering colleges, including all the big names like Georgia Institute of Technology, MIT, UC Davis, UCLA, Stanford. And it covers all engineering fields, from the popular ones like civil engineering, mechanical, electrical and electronic, as well as computer science, to the more specialized ones like aerospace, petroleum, and mining. So over 100,000 bachelor engineering degrees were awarded in 2015. So out of these, can you guess what percentage was awarded to women? Around 20%. A figure that has not changed much in the last decade. So if we move higher to the master's and the doctoral degree, so women's share stay about the same, okay, slightly higher, suggesting that women do have that appetite and that ability for further studies, yet this share remained at about 20 to 25%. Now, this brings me to a last slide. Now, this was a myth that I have really been pondering about for the last 21 years since I became an academic. So here, you see that the share of women at the rank of assistant professor, it was roughly the share of women obtaining doctoral degree, isn't it? Right, about 23.2%. Yet, as we move higher to the higher academic rank, the share of women became systematically lower, just around 10%. So what has happened in the process, and what can be done to aspire women to really continue to pursue their talents, while at the same time, while we contribute to our families, which I think all of us should, contribute to the betterment of society. So today, I think our discussion is not just limited to the gender gap, but any type of barriers for promoting lifelong STEAM education for all, and some good lessons for overcoming them. To the audience, as I think Valerie has mentioned, you may post your questions and comments online, and I shall be able to see them and to direct them to the panelists during the question and answer session. And to the panelists, I hope that you will be able to begin by sharing with us your most satisfying experience that you have empowered a person to pursue a dream and to succeed in STEAM. So let us first invite Dr. Aprille Ericsson.
Thank you. Thank you. So I believe the question is posed as something that was most satisfying in terms of helping someone to achieve their dreams. So it's been interesting over the years because I started off kind of mentoring and training students when I was a graduate student myself. I actually was one of the first during a program at my NASA facility when I was a PhD student. So not only did I win the award for presentation skills, but then I also mentored a student while I was being mentored by my mentor. And so it was very nice to come full circle with many of the students that I mentor, and for students to come up to me that were high school students that I worked with in the summer programs, and they say, because of something you said, and I'd go, what did I say? Like, what was like this soothsayer or something that I said, but it was impactful enough for them to go on and to complete degrees. In particular is one young lady who was a mechanical engineer. She'd followed on in kind of my footsteps and gotten her undergrad in mechanical. And mechanical is really, although it's one of the most sought after professions in terms of mechanical, but for women, it actually is not, because it's more like a hardcore engineering, and women tend to move or flock more to the biological or bioengineering sciences. So it was really interesting to say, you know, she said, because of something you said. So that was very, very rewarding for me.
Professor Taylor?
Okay, thank you. Well, my professional practice over the last 3 decades has been working in graduate school. So I haven't been teaching undergraduates, and it was a long time since I taught high school. But the question you're asking really speaks about a relationship with the student that goes over a long period of time. And I can think about one particular lady who was working as a lecturer in a university in Mozambique. Her name is Amelia Afonso. Well, that was her name when she started the program. She came to do a master's degree, then she came back to do a doctoral degree. And when I showed that book earlier on about researchers' transformative learning, she engaged as a transformative learner, and she undertook what is called in the trade an autoethnographic inquiry, which means that she studied her own cultural situatedness. And that brought an interesting political perspective in, because Mozambique was colonised by the Portuguese for 500 years, and then it became, through a lot of political violence, a politically independent country. But the question arises for an educator: am I educating Mozambican people for their culture? What is their culture? What is their multicultural worldview? Or am I, as a science educator, inducting them into a Western modern worldview ideology? So she interrogated her own philosophy of teaching and became very attuned to indigenous knowledge systems in Southern Africa, and began to reflect on how is it possible to bring that kind of worldview and practical village-type experiences, and she was born in a village, into the science classrooms, particularly into science teacher education. Now, winding the clock forward a little bit, last year we held an international conference on transformative educational research, and she was one of the keynote speakers, because her professional practice continued to develop after she'd finished her doctorate and gone back to her university. She became a very powerful agent of change and started doing collaborative research with other African scholars in this area, and strengthening and introducing transformative learning theory into postgraduate research in her university and other universities across Southern Africa. And I'll end the story by telling you that a couple of weeks ago, she was appointed a Vice-Chancellor of a university.
That's great. Mr. Lau? Mr. Lau? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Because I think speak Cantonese is much more fluent for me. So I try to speak in Cantonese. Is it okay?
I think it's okay. They have simultaneous interpretation, and I'm correct? Yeah, should be okay.
唔好意思啊，我廣東話會流利一啲。咁
可以
我嘗試下用廣東話去講啦。咁我諗其實喺學校裏面咧，I think create different platforms is very important for students. Because when the student come into my school, I don't know which one is gifted in STEM or in STEAM education. So we need to create different platform for them. I want to show one example. For my school, I find that some students are very interested in oceanography. So I just create an aqua cafe inside my school. About a few years ago, one of my Form 3 students, that means level maybe 9, it's level 9 student. I just create my aquarium because it's difficult to maintain the equilibrium for the water. We have tried to breeding coral and different kind of organism in the sea. I asked a professional to come to teach a student, but I need to pay for it. And some students, they just tell me, can I try to learn that? I just tell the guy who come to my schools, I can pay for you, but you must be the master of my student. And then 4 students of my inside my school will join, and 2 months they get the technique. I'm so happy that one of the students today is already a Form 6 student. That means you need to go to university. But if in the Hong Kong situation, I think his academic level cannot get into DSC, even enter the university. But I'm so happy that I know that the DSC result not yet come, but in Taiwan, he already get a degree, get he can get to Taiwan University for learning oceanography next year. He is one dream. He want to have an aqua cafe in Taiwan. So I'm so happy that if I don't put any create any platform for him, he won't have this kind of pathway. I think STEAM is also a career planning for the student. Later, I can show you some of my student product. It's very interesting. So I think for school nowadays, we need to create different platforms for students. Because I think it's difficult because I think only 20% in Hong Kong can get to university. About 80%, they need to find another pathway. So STEAM or STEM is another pathway for the student. So I'm so happy that this few years, Hong Kong school have many different kind of topic about STEAM and STEM. So I think it's...
So how about Professor Ng?
Okay, thank you. I'm a professional physicist. So if I talk about how my students succeed in STEM, that's not very meaningful. Well, I do have quite a few which are doing okay. But actually, I think one thing which made me proud is that actually several of my previous students is following me, trying to go into education, the field of education. So let me give you one example. He was my student, and now he's a physicist, and he's quite successful. And he's now the president of the Young Academy of Science in Hong Kong, which was just created several weeks ago. And under his leadership, these young scientists actually are collaborating with my organization, which is an organization for teaching gift students. And they are going to give a series of lectures trying to tell our students what will happen in STEM in the next 10 years or 20 years. So this is something which I think worth mentioning. But let me tell you what I'm interested in now. Actually, what my interest now is trying to motivate some student who has absolutely no interest in STEM or STEAM, and try to motivate them to learn something about STEM or STEAM, doesn't matter, because in the future they have to know something about it. Let me give you one example, and that example is actually we have created a course, two courses a few months ago, last spring. And one course is on Big History, which is a humanity course. And the other course is on artificial intelligence, which is pure engineering course. And now we are creating a summer school, trying to bring these two groups of students together to address an issue of how AI, artificial intelligence, would affect our future. And the Big History student is going to teach the AI students the point of view of mixed big history. And the AI student is going to tell the Big History student that they have to be more realistic, not too superficial. So this is something I'm looking very much forward towards too.
That's great. I think, from Dr. Ericsson, you can hear, in a sense, a lot of this is just speaking out, right? Be there, right? So in a sense, showing a role model, an example for people, to follow. I think you have been showing us a great example. You can be a nice mom, you can also be a great scientist. And I think from both Professor Taylor and Professor Ng, they have been very eager to groom the next generation and proud of their students and of their achievements and to carry a legacy. In a sense, I think that is also very important. So that, our next generation, our PhD students, they continue our passion to drive for it. It's not something that, we will be able to resolve in a few years' time. And I think, Mr. Lau, you have been trying to show some very interesting toys over there. I think the essential thing is perhaps this also relates to what Dr. Ericsson has suggested earlier. Toys, right? Make it fun. So from just talking about, the ocean and so on, you can have a cafe and make people, interested in the topic. But obviously, keeping the interest, keeping the fun would be quite difficult. So I will allow you some time to show us the toy, but before that, let me try to ask one of the questions from the audience, which I think is actually quite relevant, especially in Hong Kong. So here, this question is in Hong Kong. So there is a strong emphasis on examination results, especially in maths and science subjects. So a few years ago, I led a STEAM project, and when a pupil complained that it wasn't needed, I mean the A, for their GCSE, their parents agreed. So do you have any examples of how you would like to engage parents or to convince them of the importance of STEAM? Well, I mean, it's very interesting. Even nowadays at the university level, when we have admission talk, we have more parents sitting there than students, right? So getting parents convinced about the importance of STEAM would also be very important, isn't it? So I wonder, whether one of the speakers would like to respond to that. Perhaps Professor Taylor?
Yeah, look, I think this is the essence of the change process. You've heard the notion that the assessment tail wags the curriculum dog. Just think about that for a moment. So you can have all sorts of curriculum development and innovation, but if the assessment isn't resonant, if it isn't compatible with the curriculum, the assessment system will dominate and the curriculum will revert back to a traditional approach. One way to... There are many important stakeholders in education. Parents are one of them, particularly in the K-12 sector. I'm surprised that the university parents, kids are still attending them, because when I went to university, we were told, leave your parents at home, you're an adult now. But obviously not the case. Anyway, in K-12, parent-teacher nights, or where students give demonstrations, like the wonderful kids who came across and got their awards today for their innovative work in the STEAM space. If parents could see their children demonstrating how they've learned in the STEAM space, they would immediately understand the value of it. It's not so much you send them a letter and explain it in 100 words. That doesn't really gel. I think if students can demonstrate the richness of their learning and how it's relevant to the world around them, which includes their parents' lifestyles, that'd be very compelling.
Okay, so obviously, those from Hong Kong will have something to comment, but I think Professor Taylor has actually been suggesting something that I think, I would like to direct this question slightly to Dr. Ericsson as well, right? So in a sense, you are saying, well, we should, as parents, let our kids choose, right? Make their own decisions. But I mean, I'm also a mother of 3 children, right? So sometimes it's really a dilemma. Is it that we try to, support them like you have support, your daughter? And when, we should say, okay, make your own choices, but while you respect their choices and so on, you show them, the different pathways, and make them make their own choices, but maybe it's informed choices. So the role between the parents and, so to speak, the children, do you have anything to share with us, Aprille?
So I want to back up a little bit to when you first started the question, because I went back to thinking about how I was in this board meeting and I had a colleague who was thinking from a monetary perspective of what their child maybe should not be taking. And I was appalled because I thought, gee, I learned so much with taking arts and humanity classes. It made me reach deep inside and go into a place where it was not necessarily my comfort zone, because math and science were so much easier, but it made me search to be innovative and different. And so when I reflect to my own daughter and my nieces and nephews, because I helped them with raising them as well, there were times when I knew that I pushed because I knew it was the right thing no matter what. So there are times when I say to my daughter, kid, you're going to do it. I don't care what you say. It's the right thing to do. So like that happened this year with coding. With our program with Microsoft, we had her engaged in the programming. And at first she was saying, why do I have to do this on Saturday, Mommy? And then when she was in her second class, she was saying, I think I like coding. No, mommy, it's nice. I like it. It's fun. So I think that sometimes we still have to be a little bit pushy. Sometimes we back away. You have to kind of know your own child. But there are definitely us having the foresight and having been here a little bit longer to have that foresight and look at where we're going in the future and the trends, because as I mentioned, that coding may be the hot thing to do now and everybody should know and understand how to do it. But in the future, there's going to be some other transformative technology or skill that's needed. And so I truly say to students that they should be well-rounded as well. So it's not always just one focused thing in what you like, but you take things that you're not necessarily comfortable with.
So, I mean, definitely, keeping the communication and sharing, what we've learned with our children would also be very, very important, right? So perhaps, Professor Ng, you can share with us your thoughts on this? The Hong Kong system, the Hong Kong parents, helicopter parents.
Yeah. We talk with lots of Hong Kong parents. Well, we are serving the so-called gift students. So usually the parents have lots of expectations for the students, and the problem that you mentioned certainly is a routine problem that we faced. And so usually, actually we have many parent sessions trying to talk with the parents, whether they are facing difficulty in raising the child or whatever, or selecting subjects, whatever. And there are two messages we try to communicate with the parents. The first message is that, of course, we should let the kid choose whatever they want to do. And the other message is to tell them that actually the world is changing. It's changing very fast. So they should not just stick to the old way of their habit, what they think the world looks like. Well, actually, in these sessions, they are very positive. The parents are all very positive. But the problem is that when they are coming into their own kids, the behavior is totally different. Okay, I mean, we have a student that is very good at computer, but when we talk with his mom, his mom said that, well, okay, of course, his son should be free to choose whatever he likes, but of course, it should be either law or medicine. So I think, to me, I hope the cognitive scientists can teach us how we should deal with this kind of problem. I mean, it's really a problem of the thinking process. I don't understand.
Yeah. So, Mr. Lau, you want to chip in?
I think we should let the parent know that the whole world is changed, and also let them know the student ability. For example, one of my students, you just create equipment when you boil soup and you go out without turn on the fire. You say, Grandma, you don't turn off the fire, don't go out. You get the prize. Before that, the parent come to my school every time, complain the student. He always playing computer. Don't work hard, always. After he get the prize, and then the parent said that, ask the student, what will be your and you can create any new equipment or whatever. So I think that the parents know the changes needed. Also, every time our students create different kind of equipment, we get the parents come together and they will comment. For example, this equipment is not good, you can do something else. It's very happy, and all the parents will think that students can create different kind of equipment or whatever. So I think that the parents know that we need to change. It's very important.
So definitely parents would be a key group of stakeholders. So maybe we can also invite some parents, right, for some of these type of occasion. So I think, you have successfully created, aroused our curiosity. So you seems to be doing something creative there, right? So maybe you'd like to share with us some of these, and then I would like to ask a question that the audience have posed, and I think it's quite interesting.
Okay. I just bring one of the products created by my student. He's a level 7 student. 7, that means Form 1 student in Hong Kong. Every time we have, for this product, I think stand for all, not just talk. We need to incorporate into the curriculum. We have a maker lesson for them. All the students will go to, this year, we go to an elder home, and they watch the elderly and to see what kind of problem we can solve. And some of students go after the visit, they come back to our school and said that, they are very safe energy. They won't turn on any light after, even in the light, they don't turn on because they save money. So they just create a slipper with, when you press on it, and then when everywhere is dark, you turn on. So after they create this equipment, I asked a professional to comment on this, also the parent together, to comment on this. The professional asked, do you try that before? The student just said that, I tried to walk a few steps. The professional, after that, don't try to produce that one for the elderly. They will get hurt. They will fall down. Because you think that the graphic, the CG is not good. Also, one more point, you see many wire here. They said that if the elderly drop any water, they will get shot. So the students just think about that and they try. This product, we call that not yet success, but not a failed product. I think the process is very important. They try to modify that. Maybe it's later in the market, you can find my student product. I don't know. So I think the whole environment is very important. We just try to create a friendly environment to let the student to have some creativity to solve the social issue problem. This I call maker. Yeah. But also, STEAM is not compete. It's so ugly. They need to make it beautiful before they can put it in the market. So STEAM is much better, I think.
Yeah. And that's why, in a sense, I think this goes back to having diverse perspective. And people, like other than just students and also just people from technology, you need to have elderly experts, people understand how, or electric salt, to have all these different perspectives in order to improve a product, in order to make sure that STEAM will succeed. So now I have this very interesting question, very creative question as well, I think, from the audience. And this one actually is directed to Dr. Ericsson. So it is quite interesting. So the question is, so what's your expectation of the ultimate outcome of exploring space? To find a new place to evacuate the people on Earth, maybe because the blue marble has become so polluted, or to explore if Earth rubbish could be exported to space, to study or to detect any space aliens, to maintain space station for powerful weapon for certain countries. How much money needed to maintain the space station yearly? No need to go for the figures, but I think, generally, right? So how many aerospace engineers in the world and how many actually needed? So these are very, creative and big issues that we have to think about. So Dr. Ericsson, what's your thoughts on some of these?
So first, one of the ones that, because we had been talking about trash, I think that's a very relevant one. We do have space debris and trash. Many people don't realize that we have certain requirements, and they're fairly lax, that you look at the orbit and you're able to say that if I'm going to use this particular altitude, that it's not going to come back down to the Earth within a certain period of time, 20 years or so. And so the expectation is that these things are just going to continue to orbit around the Earth until they eventually degrade their orbit. So that would be a really great challenge for the future generation to figure out how we will retrieve some of this trash in orbit around the Earth. And it's getting fairly crowded in the typical sort of areas that we would really find optimum for us to orbit and push satellites. It's going to become more important because we're looking at very small spacecraft for the future. We are doing more and more what we call CubeSats, which are on the order of the size of that container there. That's a cube, just a little bit smaller than that, like a coffee cup size. And flying them in swarms, so that's going to cause more of a problem. But the thing is that what is nice and convenient about that is that universities have been doing this for some time. And so there is an opportunity for someone who does not have is sort of the large resources of missions like the European Space Agency or Canadian Space Agency or NASA, that you could still do great science or communication with very small satellites. But there is that problem of orbital debris. Some other aspects are whether or not we would want to leave here. Like, I really like the Earth. When I was younger, I used to think that I would travel to Mars. I was really interested, and I remember one of my first big interviews on TV, and I said to the newscaster, well, the moon's played out, I want to go to Mars. But the more that I began to really realize the difference in environment and what the Earth offers compared to the planets, at least in our solar system, there's really not much going on anywhere else but here. We've got such a beautiful landscape. We don't have to wear all kinds of equipment and worry about the concerns, or the environment is very conducive to what we're accustomed to as human beings. I'm not so sure that I want to be worrying about mass exodus from the planet that we've come to grow and love. This big blue marble is ours, and we need to take care of it. It hurts my heart so much to see the things that are happening over the course of really my generation. And constantly we're trying to eradicate or change the behaviors at home so that we are not contributing in a detrimental way to Mother Earth. So I would not say that we can just get off of the rock and find it, but there are some reasons for us that I think that the humans in general have an inherent wish to explore. And so the proving ground would be probably the lunar environment because it's closer, and then traveling somewhere else. So I would like to see us begin to do those capabilities, just because there may be something else out there. There may be some other group or entity that we should maybe be communicating with, and we need to be able to also protect our planet.
So I think, it's really that, I'm going to ask you to respond, because this is an ethical issue as well, right? So I'm going, but I think, generally, what NASA and what you have been doing has been really amazing, but I mean, keeping ourselves hungry, there's something out there that we really don't understand, right? Is one of the major curiosity and drive for science to go ahead. Right. But essentially, as Professor Taylor already, kind of reacted, I think when we try to explore space and issues like that, there's also a lot of these, ethical debates, issues that are involved. So I think you have something to say, right, to round up also.
Well, you've said everything I was going to say. I think, this is a really nice topic that can be the subject of an ethical dilemma teaching story, because it's full of shoulds. Should we leave Earth and go into space? The next question is, who gets selected and who gets left behind? How do you choose? So that's another interesting ethical question. Then there's the question of space junk, not just going around the Earth. We have got so much space junk already on the moon, and now we're putting stuff on Mars. So those beautiful rovers that appeal to me enormously as a physicist. I can go onto the internet and look through the eyes of the Mars rover as it travels across the surface of Mars. Phenomenal. But then I watched the movie with that actor, who gets stranded on Mars, and he has to terraform within this limited space. And of course, he's there in isolation. So how do we justify introducing new bacteria and organic materials from the Earth onto another planet? Which ones should we use or should we not? Every time you have a lander going down and sitting on the moon or Mars or the other planets, it's carrying microorganisms from the Earth. Should we be contaminating other planets? You can write a wonderful dilemma story whilst you're teaching kids about rocket science and space exploration. You bring in all that value conversation.
And I mean, for Professor in particular, like if we all agree, space is something that we don't know and we need to explore further and to understand that, right? But in a sense, like for the Hong Kong parents, same, Hong Kong, mentality. So this is not something that would yield you a job, right? Because NASA hasn't really set up a branch here yet, and we don't have a lot of jobs in aerospace. So how can we convince, or in a sense, should Hong Kong actually also invest in this type of science in understanding the space? What do the two of you think about this? Professor Ng?
Well, I think I don't think Hong Kong should invest in this field because it's just too expensive. But otherwise, as a scientist, of course, very often science, important discoveries comes from places that we don't expect. So I think space science is something which many people, in particular I think physicists, they're looking for something which is unexpected. For example, they're trying to say that our whole theory of the universe is incorrect or something like that, something very big. And so that, there's something that we can do, but I don't think we should invest a lot on that. That is for people who are, it's a bit crazy or something like that.
Mr. Lau?
I think Hong Kong is a special area. We have different kind of topic. For example, we can have fintech, we can have different kind of topic. Maybe sometime later, some students will have interest in this area. They can go everywhere, maybe go to NASA or go to United States, wherever. But I think Hong Kong nowadays, most important thing is for students, for secondary students. I think we can start from the social issue problem. For example, how to improve our living because so many tall buildings, greenhouse effect. Also, there's many topics we can choose other than space because I think that need to have great investment. I think maybe later, but not now.
Yeah, I think essentially is we can work together, right? Not everyone has to do exactly the same thing, right? You can work on fintech, and there would be, NASA, working on aerospace, and the essential thing, like one of the big images that we've seen, right, from the telescope, was actually the fruits of different countries working together. So essentially, other than different people, different groups of people in the society, perhaps different countries in the world should also work together to further improve STEAM education and life for all on Earth. So I think that would round up our forum nicely, and it's time for lunch. Thanks a lot for staying behind, and thanks for joining the forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for such an amazing forum discussion. Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce to you our Chief Executive, Mr. Matthias Lee, to come up to our stage for our souvenir presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. So can I please invite the honorable speakers to come up on stage again for the souvenir presentation. Thank you. So please, I would like to invite Dr. Ericsson for the souvenir presentation, as well as Professor Taylor, and also Professor Loo, Professor Ng, and Mr. Lau. Thank you very much. Right. Right. Please, can I invite Professor Loo? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Lau. Sorry, Professor. Thank you. And Professor Ng, please. Thank you all for coming along for the forum discussion. Thank you. Please be seated. And thank you, Mr. Lee. Let's take a photo now. Thank you very much.